space, CVAM-65, otherwise known as the USS Enterprise. The aircraft, Grumman F-14, or Tomcat. The aviators, 2 naval officers recently graduated from the Top Gun Fighter Weapons School. Their mission, to protect the Atlantic Fleet from airborne attack. These men and machines are America's finest. Together they are known as MiG killers of the U.S. Navy. Since the dawning of the jet age, Soviet-built MiG fighters have always seemed to be naval aviation's most mighty nemesis. This MiG-23 Flogger is flown not only by the USSR, but also Libya, Syria, Iraq, and East Germany. When piloted by capable hands, Flogger dogfighting capability should never be underestimated. This time, the F-14 was victorious. A hard-earned tradition has been set by the Navy for their excellence in air-to-air combat. This honor should never be taken for granted. For decades of jet-powered naval aviation experience have paid the price for U.S. Navy air superiority in the skies above the free world. The place, South Korea. The date, 25 June 1950. The headlines, North Korean troops invade South Korea. The mission, USS Happy Valley and USS Philippine Sea are to set sail for the Sea of Japan, to bomb and strafe North Korean air bases and military emplacements from just off their coastline. Naval aviation was about to enter the jet age. The Grumman F-9 Panther would be the Navy's first carrier-launched jet fighter bomber to sea combat. It was initially used to defend Navy Sky Raiders and Corsairs from Soviet Yak fighters. Without the Panthers, Sky Raiders and Corsairs would be meat on the table for the Yaks. Panther aviators tuned up for MiG killing by downing 2 Yak fighters on their first mission over North Korea. Operation Strangle and Saturate were the code names for their own ground attacks. These Panther bomb strikes were crucial in stopping the flow of troops and supplies streaming in from the north. Panthers helped to win many a battle on the ground, but in the skies, a Navy pilot's toughest rival would be the MiG-15 Faggot. Air Force Captain Ralph Parr, 6-time MiG killer, talks about what he thought of the 15.
The MiG had a smaller wingspan, was shorter, smaller all over, therefore harder to see. It could turn tighter, it could out-accelerate, it could out-decelerate. It could climb higher, and it had, for a while there, it had better than a 2,500 foot per minute rate of climb advantage, and it had bigger guns. It did not have a radar gun sight, but had a computing gun sight, I believe. And generally speaking, one of those advantages the MiG had will normally work for you in combat.
Despite its bomber origins, the MiG-15's rate of climb and high ceiling made it an effective fighter. U.S. Air Force Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, 8-time MiG killer, admired the capabilities of a few of the MiG pilots, too.
There were pilots that I encountered that were as good as any that I have ever seen any place. And I have to assume from the intelligence reports and so forth that I have seen that the Russians were training the students at a certain point when they brought them into combat. And the Russian pilots, every now and then, would break away and really encounter our forces. And they were very good.
North Korean Lieutenant Kum Suk-no, who defected with his MiG-15 in 1953, reported 900 combat-ready MiGs in the communist inventory. No fighter has ever had a bigger impact in the aerial arena than the MiG-15 Faggot. Regardless of the terrible odds naval aviators faced, 14 enemy aircraft were shot down during the war. Lieutenant Commander W.T. Amon, commanding officer of VF-111, was the Navy's first MiG killer. The place, Yankee Station, just offshore North Vietnam in the Gulf of Tonkin. The aircraft, the F-8 Crusader, or more proudly, the last of the gunslingers. It was now 1965. The Vietnam War was in full swing, and U.S. Navy aviators were soon to meet up with enemy MiGs again. This time, they would be armed with a new and more lethal weapon. It was the Sidewinder missile, or AIM-9, which was to change dogfight tactics forever. Like a rocket, the Sidewinder missile is self-propelled. It also carried a powerful, high-explosive warhead. But its unique IR seeker would latch on to a MiG's hot exhaust and track it down until it was close enough to kill it with a proximity detonation. This made it a MiG killer's most valuable weapon in the skies over North Vietnam. The heat-seeking Sidewinders were just the thing for a high-speed duel when there wasn't any time to waste. Just fire and forget. Exhibitions of Sidewinder firepower impressed all the VIPs who got to see it in action. Between 1965 and 1968, F-8 Crusaders were credited with 18 MiG kills. To their honor, the checkmates of VF-211 flying from the USS Hancock and Bonhomme Richard bagged 7 of the 18 enemy fighters. The Screaming Eagles, Checkertails, Iron Angels, Sundowners, Hunters, and Satan's Kittens were all MiG-killing squadrons. The Navy began to retire the aging Crusader in 1968. However, it was not until 1972 that the newer F-4 Phantom II's tally of MiG kills would surpass it. The place, Moscow, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Premier Khrushchev's stated goal, to defeat democracy by supplying military equipment to its satellite nations. One of his tools, Mikoyan-Gurevich jet fighters. The facts behind the MiG fighter legend have been heavily cloaked in secrecy within the Iron Curtain. What little is known can be traced back to the late 1940s, when the British government sent a Rolls-Royce Nene turbojet engine to the Soviets for goodwill. Mikoyan-Gurevich engineers quickly installed the power plant in an available German airframe, and the first MiG fighter was born. The heavily politicized indoctrination to communist military forces was physically and mentally rigorous, sometimes even brutal. Training for their fighter pilots was highly prioritized for the preparations of an eventual war. The single-seat MiG-21 Fishbed was Moscow's best fighter in the late 1960s. About 100 well-armed aircraft were given to North Vietnam to shoot the Navy down. The USS Constellation was home to the biggest bunch of MiG killers who ever flew during this difficult and often confusing war. From 1965 to 1973, the Connie sailed on 7 tours to Yankee Station and spent a grand total of 824 days on the line. 2 squadrons of McDonnell Douglas F-4Bs and the more powerful Js with advanced radar were launched from the angled deck of CVA-64. Originally developed by the Navy, the F-4 Phantom II was the most popular multi-role fighter in the Vietnam War, as it was deployed with the Marines and Air Force as well. In addition to the heat-seeking Sidewinder missiles, the Navy Phantoms also carried radar-guided medium-range Sparrow missiles. This gave the pilot and weapons systems officer their choice of how to kill any opposing North Vietnamese MiGs. The Marines used their F-4 Phantoms most of the time for bomb runs in support of their ground troops. The first Marine squadrons were stationed at Da Nang in 1965. Soon thereafter, another Phantom base was established at Chu Lai. Both of these air bases were located in a region codenamed I Corps. Quang Nam and Quang Tin provinces were particularly deadly I Corps hell zones, as they were located close to the DMZ border. This was just fine for Marine Phantoms, though, as with an average bomb load of 5,000 pounds, exposed Viet Cong and North Vietnamese regulars would be quickly decimated. Navy F-4s on MiG patrol would fly cover for Marine F-4s heavily laden with bombs. As a team, they were virtually unstoppable, hitting targets as far north as Hanoi and Haiphong. Life for many of Hanoi's communist citizens went on as usual until U.S. bombs would rain down on them. The North Vietnamese quickly set up an effective civil defense program which greatly reduced their casualties. MiG-21 Fishbeds were launched to intercept Navy and Marine aircraft. One of their more successful tactics would be to attempt an attack on the Marine F-4 bombers, thus forcing them to jettison their ordnances early and missing their more important targets. In many circumstances, the North Vietnamese MiGs would then retreat and leave the unsuccessful F-4s no choice but to return to their bases. The mission of the Navy F-4 interceptors was to keep the MiGs away from the Marine aircraft. Many a Navy MiG killer was made during the heavier bombing operations such as Rolling Thunder and Linebacker. The Navy's top MiG killers were Lieutenant Randy Cunningham and his backseater, Lieutenant Junior Grade William Driscoll. On 10 May 1972, they downed 3 MiG fighters during one mission and wrote the most spectacular combat record of any U.S. fighter pilot during the Vietnam War. The North Vietnamese fought back with all they had. Surprisingly, small arms fire would claim the most U.S. combat air losses. Nobody fought as a team better than the U.S. Marine Corps. Ground troops received heavy air support whenever they needed it from their aviator counterparts. From their heroic stand at Khe Sanh to their near-countless sorties from Da Nang and Chu Lai, the Marines knew they could do it all and proved it every day. Cunningham and Driscoll flew an F-4J from Squadron VF-96's Fighting Falcons. With their 2 earlier MiG kills, they were the only naval aces of the Vietnam War. Cunningham and Driscoll's exploits became the inspiration for the next generation of naval aviators. They loved to talk about air-to-air combat.
I'm sure Randy would agree with this. There are some things in the air combat maneuvering environment that are always the same, that don't change. There are certain attitudes and philosophies that were the same in World War I, in World War II, and today. There are some refinements and subtleties, of course, in the jet age that certainly did not exist back in the propeller age. But in the final analysis, it's one man in a machine versus another man in a machine. And there are certain things that we could talk about in fighter air-to-air tactics. And we could talk with a World War I fighter pilot or World War II fighter pilot. And the things that we would talk about would be almost exactly identically the same. We have a firm belief at the Navy Fighter Weapons School. The first man to see the other man is probably going to win. And if he doesn't win, he's probably not going to lose, be it on radar or be it through eyeball.
Times have changed little since the time of Richthofen, Oswald, Boca, Immelman, Galan, and since the time of McCampbell, the biggest difference that we face is that we only saw MiGs 3 times. And at one time, there was a massive MiGs up. But when McCampbell was flying, they had large formations going against large formations. They brought 100 and raised it to.
U.S. Navy F-4 Phantom MiG killers blasted 39 enemy fighters out of the sky. In addition to the Fighting Falcons, other F-4 MiG killing squadrons included the Screaming Eagles, Ghost Riders, Aardvarks, Chargers, Pukin Dogs, Freelancers, Tomcatters, Tarsiers, Shamrocks, Silver Kings, Vigilantes, Sundowners, and Sluggers. They were the Navy's best of the best. The year, 1972. The aircraft, Grumman's twin-seat F-14 Tomcat. The Tomcat's mission, to attack and destroy multiple airborne targets in all weather conditions and at night. Translated, it means to kill MiGs. Built at Grumman's Bethpage, Long Island high-tech factory, the F-14 was designed for fleet defense, and for this mission, its MiG killing capabilities were to be superior to that of any other aircraft. Unlike normal radars, the Tomcat's ultra-sophisticated AWG-9 pulse Doppler radar can scan for enemy MiGs and track up to 24 of them at the same time. The AWG-9 is specially hooked up to the Tomcat's 6 AIM-54 Phoenix missiles, which have a range in excess of 120 miles. In case the Tomcat engages in a tight dogfight, it can also be armed with a standard mix of the latest Sidewinder and Sparrow missiles. A 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon completes the weapons package. At close range or from over the horizon, F-14 Tomcats were ready to add to the Navy's MiG hit list.
Swing wing that sweeps automatically with changes in airspeed. The Tomcat has the tight turning ability to outmaneuver other fighters in closest combat. In such engagements, keeping track of the enemy is the key to staying alive. Here, the F-14 has a big advantage with its 2-man crew to divide responsibilities and a cockpit designed for maximum visibility. In training exercises, the F-14 has faced a variety of opponents, each selected because of its dynamic maneuvering capabilities or similarity to known enemy-type fighters. And the results have always been the same. In one-on-one or multiple aircraft engagements, where they are outnumbered by as many as 4 to 1, the Tomcat consistently comes out on top. Now fully operational, F-14 squadrons are deployed with the 7th Fleet in the Pacific and with the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean. During fleet operations, F-14 squadrons have performed exceedingly well, with the Navy officially acknowledging that the Tomcat had the best initial deployment of any tactical aircraft to go to sea.
The F-14's able and loyal teammate would be the E-2 Hawkeye early warning radar aircraft. The year, 1981. The country, Libya. The dictator, Muammar Gaddafi. His favorite playthings, Soviet tanks, personnel carriers, and jet fighters. In the midst of tensions over the Navy's Sixth Fleet maneuvers in the Mediterranean's international waters, Muammar Gaddafi ordered 2 Sukhoi Su-22 fitters to attack F-14 Tomcats on patrol. These Soviet swing-wing attack aircraft closely resembled Su-7B fighters. The E-2 Hawkeye detected the Sukhoi's approach and directed the Tomcats to intercept them. The F-14's first dogfight had begun. The F-14 shot up the 2 Sukhois like Pat Garrett and Wyatt Earp. Not surprisingly, Tomcat aviators loved their fighter and sang its praises.
It's almost a self-contained GCI interceptor fighter combination that can take the fight to any scenario, any place in the world.
As I deployed with VF-1 and 2 on the Enterprise, and we used to simulate very realistic scenarios. For example, backfire bombers flying at 50 to 55,000 feet at supersonic airspeeds with lower fighter cover. We went out on exercise after exercise like this with the F-14 and demonstrated time and again that because of the 2 men in the airplane, because of our ability to handle the ECM problem, we could shoot those bombers at long range, still have the short-range weapons to get in and visually engage the fighters, take care of them, and press on about our business.
The heart of the F-14 is its Phoenix weapon system. In fact, the F-14 was uniquely designed around the Phoenix system. The smartest air-to-air missile around, the Phoenix dwarfs other fighters' missiles. It weighs almost 1,000 pounds and measures 13 feet in length. A solid fuel rocket motor propels its 135-pound proximity-fused high-explosive warhead at speeds in excess of 3,000 miles per hour. With a success rate of 84%, Tomcats loaded with 6 Phoenixes were certain to enjoy a high kill-to-loss ratio. After the F-14 has fired its deadly load of Phoenixes, the Tomcat Sparrows, Sidewinders, and cannon projectiles mean that the F-14 will still be as lethal as any other fighter deployed today.
The nice part about the F-14 is that you got the best of both worlds. You can get into the dogfight role. without taking one iota away from the very significant capabilities in the long-range interceptor role.
Wing buys an awful lot. It gives you an awfully good on-station loiter time. It gives you a tremendous turning aircraft, and it gives you a slow approach speed.
Throughout the flight regime, and almost at any store loading you'd care to dream up, you decide where you want to go and you point the nose and the airplane goes there.
It's going to be an awful long time before anyone could come close to finding an aircraft that can take the interceptor role and the fighter role and come any closer to optimizing the two in one aircraft.
The nice part about the whole system is that being computer-based, software-oriented, the growth potential in the system is almost unlimited.
The MiG killer's favorite home, the USS Constellation, was among the first aircraft carriers to receive the F-14. The Tomcat was eventually fully deployed to the Navy's 2nd Fleet in the Atlantic, 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean, and 3rd and 7th Fleets operating in the Pacific Ocean. Around the world, the F-14 Tomcat had become the new symbol of American firepower. Top Gun is no Hollywood love story. Located in Fightertown, USA, near San Diego, the Navy Fighter Weapons School was established during the Vietnam War to improve sagging kill-to-loss ratios. The curriculum starts with the basics. One of the first dogfights pits the F-14 against a highly maneuverable but underpowered T-38 jet trainer. This lesson teaches aviators how to use the F-14's combination of power and high wing loading to outfly a lighter MiG fighter.
Once the T-38 starts to make the attack on you, the first thing you have to do is negate it. And the best way to do that is to break into him. You've got G available, so start your break. Okay, now we want to go from this defensive position into a neutral and an offensive position. The way we can do this with the F-14 is we can pick its nose up. So we're sitting there, if we start to have the overshoot and going in here, we'll flop the wings level and we'll take the airplane up into the vertical. Is there any chance the T-38 can out-zoom me up there and get me back? No way. As long as you get your burners lit in here and get your nose into the vertical, the T-38 just can't climb up. The more he tries to come up with you, the more he's going to load that wing up. And as you can see, that wing is much less than yours, so he's going to lose a lot more energy. Therefore, he isn't going to be able to sustain up into the zone. Okay, is there any way he can really counter that, or is he just going to end up in the same place every time? No. The less that he counters, or the more dynamic that he counters, not coming up with you, the faster you're going to go after his wing line, the faster you're going to be able to place your nose behind him, and the faster you're going to be able to deploy your weapon system. You have gone from the complete defensive into an offensive position, and that's what we're trying to do.
Even though Top Gun students are already good aviators when they are assigned to Fightertown, the training they get here makes them the Navy's best. A-4 Skyhawks are used to simulate more capable MiG fighters in a later lesson.
Once I start to make my attack, you're going to have to counter that. And the way you do that is you start your nose up. Get yourself going right up into the vertical, making sure you get your afterburners lit, and start going up. Lyle's going to coach you into where I am. Once you're up in the air, start to do your displacement roll towards my 6 o'clock. there in a position like this. So then what I'll have to do is I'll have to counter that, making sure you get your burners out right up in here. Now once you have those out, start your attack. Try to make a kill. Once that I'm sitting there, I'll have to counter that. I'll have to bring the nose up, get up in there. Once you see that you can't make the attack, bring yourself right up into the vertical again, and then this is where you're going to really make your money. You're going to be back up over top of me. I will be out of energy. I'll have to bring my nose down. So if you're coming over the top, you'll have a good position to start making the kill.
The place? Armavir, deep inside the Soviet Union. The goal? To train Soviet and Warsaw Pact allies in air combat techniques. Most training is extremely formal and basic. The Soviet pursuit of personnel excellence and dedication to their motherland dictates that extreme caution be used in even the easiest of dogfights. But unlike U.S. naval aviators, Soviet pilots are instructed not to use their initiative and to follow only traditional regiment doctrine. The Soviets' high-tech MiG-23 flogger is slightly older than the F-14 Tomcat, yet has a similar swept wing. It carries lethal heat-seeking aphid and Apex missiles. The carrier, USS John F. Kennedy, CV-67. The location, in the Med, more than 100 miles from Libya. The F-14 Tomcats mission, launch from MiG Combat Air Patrol to protect their fleet and themselves from any airborne attack. The year, 1989. Gaddafi once again orders his fighters to attack, this time with MiG-23 floggers. E-2 Hawkeyes immediately detected the Libyan MiG's takeoff from Al Bumba Air Base and warned the patrolling Tomcats. With the preservation of peace foremost in their minds, the F-14 aviators changed their flight path 5 times, trying to avoid a conflict with the MiGs. Each time the Tomcats remaneuvered, the floggers accelerated and countermaneuvered with an aggressive noses-on approach. From the floggers, the Tomcat aviators could wait no longer for the MiGs to turn away. They armed their weapon systems, for the dogfight was about to begin. At the end of this twisting and turning fuel at speeds up to 500 knots, the F-14 Tomcat became the Navy's latest MiG-killing fighter. 2 parachutes were sighted, although the ultimate fate of the Libyan pilots is still unknown. As the Tomcats had waited until the last possible moment before attacking the floggers, they claimed their victims with Sparrow and Sidewinder missiles. With a kill-to-loss ratio of 4-0, Tomcat enthusiasts had plenty to celebrate. After a fight like this one, nothing is more relaxing than a steel-decked party. Yet the strategy to keep Soviet air power in check is certain to continue. The year, sometime in the future. The aircraft, McDonnell Douglas's F-A-18 Hornet strike fighter. Its goal, to support ground troops and, if challenged, become a MiG killer. The F-A-18 Hornet contains the most sophisticated technology of any fighter or attack aircraft in the Naval Air Systems Command inventory. Its graphite composite structures are both lightweight and strong. A heads-up display and 3 television screens inform the aviator of everything he needs to know in battle. From the standpoint of weapons management and maneuverability, the F-A-18 is an aviator's dream come true. Combat-proven cannon projectiles with Sparrow and Sidewinder missiles are its arsenal. The Soviet Union's latest fighter is the MiG-29 Fulcrum. Currently replacing MiG-23 floggers in the Soviet Air Force, the Fulcrum is more maneuverable and has completely redesigned weapons system. Experts in military aviation confidently state that the Fulcrum is the Soviets' most capable dogfighter. Its look-down, shoot-down radar makes it an effective attack platform as well. The scenario? A dogfight between the Hornet and the Fulcrum. The winner? A pilot and aircraft whose talents and capabilities become one.